Nights, the show where we talk about some truly bizarre and disturbing crime cases. My name is Liz, and today is True Crime Tuesday. It's also Mardi Gras, so today I am going to bring you a gruesome story from the Big Easy. New Orleans is a beautiful city, known for its unique heritage. It's full of music, festivals, food, and a vibrant nightlife. But tonight we're going to take it down a little. It's March 21st, 1994, and tonight we're in a quiet retirement home. 82-year-old Anne Bryan is winding down for the night. Anne Bryan was both an artist and a musician. She had jet black hair and large circular glasses, and she loved to play bridge with her friends from church. Tonight, as she frequently did, she left her door unlocked for the nurse who would come and tend to her. She would be found stabbed to death so severely that she was almost decapitated and disemboweled. This murder would remain unsolved for 10 years. Fast forward 5 years, it's January 5th, 1999, and Herbert Jones was spending his morning squirrel hunting. We are in the outer area of southeastern Baton Rouge, and at the moment this area was being developed and new roads and houses were constantly being built. Herbert was strolling along one of these fields where one new road was being built. He was taking advantage of the quiet and peaceful scenery before it became a new neighborhood. So as he was walking along, he scanned the area looking for squirrels, and something caught his eye. There was a dark mass up near the dead end sign that he could make out down the road. Curious, Herbert decided to investigate, and when he made his way up close enough to see what the mass could be, he stopped, ran back to his truck, and called 911. Herbert discovered the body of Catherine Hall, a 39-year-old woman who was brutally stabbed and mutilated. Fast forward another 5 years, it's April 29th, 2004, and Terry Limon and Sean Vincent Gillies are at home winding down for the night. A mutual friend had introduced them to each other about 10 years prior, and the quirky sci-fi loving pair seemed perfect for each other. They enjoyed collecting things like stamps and books and dressing up for Renaissance fairs. Terry was a convenience store manager, and Sean at the moment was unemployed. They had just enjoyed a meal that Sean had cooked for them and a movie in the living room couch. At a little past 1 a.m., they had just climbed into bed together and shut off the lights when they heard a loud bang and what sounded like voices in their kitchen. This was followed by more loud crashes, and they could smell smoke. Stunned, they leapt out of bed just as the door burst open and the figures in black rushed in, guns pointed at them. As the SWAT team cuffs Sean and starts leading him out of the house, Terry is horrified and demands to know what is happening. An officer turns to her, and what he will tell her will completely destroy the world that she knows. Looking her dead in the eyes, he says, "Ma'am, didn't you know you were living with a serial killer?" That's right. The sweet, quirky guy who would kiss her on the cheek for no reason and bring her to work was apparently responsible for killing 8 women. And not just killing them, butchering them, eating them, and having his way with their dead bodies. So how does this happen? Let's go back to 1962. It's June 24th, and Norman and Yvonne Gillies welcomed their son into the world. Norman was described as mentally ill alcoholic. When Gillis was only about a year old, there was an instance where Norman held a gun to his head, and Yvonne was able to wrestle the gun away from him right before he killed Sean. After that incident, Norman spent a month in an institution, and when he was released, he decided to stay away from Sean and Yvonne for their safety. Although devastated, Yvonne vowed to do the best she could for her little angel, and she did. Sean's childhood, besides giving outbursts such as kicking trash cans and yelling. He was mostly described as a quirky and intelligent kid. So what led him to start killing? In his own words, it was stress. Shortly after he met Terry, he walked into the retirement building that Bryan lived in and found her room unlocked. He originally intended to rape her, but when she started to yell, he pulled out a knife and stabbed her in the throat until she stopped yelling. This attack was completely random, as most of Gillis's attacks were. Then it would be another 5 years before he murdered Catherine Hall and began a spree that would take the lives of 6 more women, only ending after police were able to match tire tracks from the last crime scene to his car. There are many bizarre things about this case, but the one that stands out to me the most is his relationship with Terry, Limon, who was his girlfriend the entire time that he was an active serial killer. In her own words,
John was probably one of the best kind of boyfriends you could have. He was polite, he was nice, he always thought of you first, and Sean was going to be the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with.
Sounds good to me, but it wasn't all perfection. Gillis and Limon didn't have a sex life. He said he felt it was icky, but this didn't stop him from watching porn. Hours of porn. And not just any porn. A lot of what he watched would include rape, dead bodies, torture, serial killer type stuff. There were a few times he would call Terry over to show her pictures of dead women, all excited. When she didn't share his excitement, he waited until she was at work to look at these things. So, respectful. Another notable incident occurred with his third victim, Mosley Schmidt. Hardy was described as a well-to-do woman who was a serious runner. This woman had competed in the Boston Marathon. Ultimately, though, this habit would be her undoing and is now my new excuse for not running. You see, one morning when she was out taking her morning run, she caught Sean Gillis's eye. 3 weeks later, he came back looking for her, and because she was a creature of habit, he found her. Thinking fast as he saw her running that morning, he barreled his car into her and knocked her into a nearby ditch. He leapt out of his car and pulled a zip tie around her neck, killing her, then stuffed her body into his car. After having his way with her dead body, he stuffed it in the trunk and went to pick up Terry at work. Terry had epilepsy, so Sean would drive her to and from work. The next day, when he went to bring Terry to work, she noticed a horrible smell in the car because Hardy's body was still in the trunk. Gills told her that he had hit an animal the day before and that he must have gotten some of it stuck on the car and that he would take care of it. And he did. The next day, Hardy's body was found dumped in a bayou. These were the closest indications that Terry had that something was off about Gillis, and she was horrified to discover that she had driven around with a dead body in the trunk of the car. But according to her, if Sean had denied everything he was accused of, she would have believed him. In her own words,
This geeky little guy that I had just adored all these years just kind of hung his head and turned it to the side and looked at me, those big blue eyes, and said, "Yeah, honey bunny, I did all that."
insane. Something else that stands out about Terry and Gillis's relationship, as if that wasn't enough, was that Terry wasn't just some mealy-mouthed pushover. No, she actually had a second husband who hit her, and before he did, she told him not to. When he did, she grabbed a meat cleaver in the kitchen and just lit into his arm. This would end their marriage, but was obviously a pretty traumatic experience. So when Terry and Gillis first started dating, she decided to test him and slap him when they had one of their first minor arguments. At first, Gillis was stunned and stood there looking at her, his fists clenching and unclenching. Then, tears streaming down his face, he shouted, "Girls don't hit boys and boys don't get girls," and ran from the room. Not really the reaction you'd expect from a cold-hearted killer, but... So another bizarre thing about Gillis's reign of terror was that he wasn't operating alone. Well, he was, but there was another killer in the area. Derek Todd Lee was murdering women at the same time as Gillis, and he formed sort of a morbid fixation with the killer who was working in the same area as him. In fact, when detectives caught Derek Todd Lee, they thought that they had caught the Baton Rouge killer. So, until Gillis killed again, which earned him the nickname the other Baton Rouge killer. When they arrested Gillis, they found a whole folder on his computer about the work of Derek Todd Lee, who he considered his competition. So besides that, the other thing that makes this case so bizarre is just the pure brutality of the crimes that Gillis committed. Gillis dabbled in necrophilia and cannibalism. He looked at women as two different categories. In his own words,
"There are two kinds of women. There are the women I love and adore and would die for. There are the women that are things."
Here is a brief rundown of some of the more macabre acts that he committed, and let me warn you, they are not for the faint of heart. Gillis got pretty creative with his fourth victim, Joyce Williams. Let's just say he made his own holes to use when he was having his way with her dead body. And when he was done, it was time for his snack. He chose her nipples. I can't. His seventh victim, Johnny Mae Williams, was actually a woman he called a friend, so that in and of itself was weird. She was a mother of three who knew him for about 8 years before he killed her. And she didn't just work for him, they would sometimes smoke pot and hang out. When Gillis killed her, he cut off her hands and ended up keeping one of them. And he also cut the tattoo off his last victim, Donna Bennett Johnson, sort of a souvenir. Sean Vincent Gillis, you are one sick freak. Here is another clip of him describing his urges and methods.
And these urges are strong and they're very powerful. They're strong and they get stronger the longer you go without a successful mission. I mean, there have been days where I would have grabbed someone right off because there would have been so unavailable to, I mean, literally grab them off. Sometimes I would follow a woman, not really following her to rape her or something, but just because I liked the way she walked. Literally.
Wow. Gillis is 60 years old and still detained in the Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola. Well, that's going to do it for today's story, but I do want to leave you on a more positive note, so here is a quick bit about a company in New Orleans called Lighthouse Louisiana. Now, Lighthouse Louisiana is getting the feel-good spotlight today because of their focus on employing both the visually and hearing impaired. It's a company that makes things such as pillowcases and paper cups, and they are actually known for being the largest employer of the blind in the state of Louisiana. Bravo! Well, thank you so much again for joining me today. If you liked today's video, please consider subscribing, and please let me know in the comments what you think about Sean and his practices. And stay safe out there. Until next week, bye!